So I repeat, people don't have bad beliefs because they're ignorant or because they're stupid or because they're irrational. They do it because they're ideologues and because we live in an age in which ideology is the centerpiece of everything that we consume. And the reason we're polarized is because we're pissed off.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
My intellectual bête noir, Steven Pinker, appeared on the Bill Maher Show a couple of days ago. So I feel it is my duty to once again debunk his most ridiculous claims. And before I begin doing so, a friendly reminder that I wrote a book already debunking Steven Pinker's most ridiculous claims with lots of facts and lots of figures. So please, this channel is not monetized, so if you want to contribute financially in any way, buy the book. Link in the description. And yeah. So let's start. I should add, I'm not a huge fan of Bill Maher, as you can probably imagine. But there's a reason why Bill Maher likes Steven Pinker, and it's not necessarily because of his political or economic views. It's that Steven Pinker is also another one of those kind of intellectual dark web adjacent types. He's basically been famous or infamous by his anti-woke punditry as well. So, you know, they have quite a degree of affinity in that sense. So let's watch.
First up, he's a professor of psychology at Harvard and author of the book Rationality.
Okay, first and foremost, why the fuck in 2021, year of our Lord, do we need another goddamn book about rationality? Why? This has been done to fucking death. Over the past decade, I cannot count how many stupid books there have been written about rationality and why everyone who disagrees with you is irrational. And you have all these idiotic logic lords debating on Twitter or Facebook and accusing everyone of some cognitive bias or some shit like that, when basically they don't even have their arguments straight. I am sick of these people. I am sick of this fetishization of rationality. The grand majority of people aren't stupid because they're irrational. They're stupid because they're ideologues. That's the fact of the matter. Every single person that you debate on Twitter or anywhere else that has some hideous political or economic views, it's not that they're ignorant, although that's a big part of it as well. But even if they were educated on the subject, and you would think that through debate they would be educated on the subject. So it's not education. It's not that they're irrational either. It's that they are ideologues. They seek the information that they want deliberately. So the idea of publishing a book that someone's going to read this book and like, oh, I was so irrational before, now I'm going to be rational, and coincidentally end up adopting all the radical centrist policies that people like Steven Pinker advocate for. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. We don't need all these fucking books. We need to just end this, please. I know that no one's going to listen to this, but every fucking book publisher, when you get a manuscript for yet another book on rationality, tell them to go fuck themselves. We're done with this. We are done with this. Anyway. Look, if you want to buy one book on rationality and cognitive biases and all things like that, just buy Daniel Kahneman's book, Think Fast, Think Slow. That one's really good. It's like a mini textbook of basically behavioral sciences in a nutshell. That's it. That's all you need to read.
What it is, why it seems scarce, why it matters. Steven Pinker. Okay. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Stephen Pinker, welcome back to our show.
Thank you.
I'm going to get into the specifics of your book first, but also for people who know the name, they know a little about you. Let's clear up some things for them. You have this reputation as a guy who's a little too happy about progress. And all you're ever doing is citing the statistics, right? I mean, give us some of your greatest.
How innocent. All you're doing is just, saying facts. No, now, one of the phrases in my book, and this is like a phrase that I think every economist really knows for a fact, is the numbers don't lie, but you can lie with numbers. If you don't understand that concept, then you'll tend to agree with the Steven Pinkers of this world just because they produce a number from a reputable source, but provides a complete misinterpretation of what that number means. And I'm going to prove it to you.
It's like extreme poverty, right? Where has that gone like in the last 30 years?
Well, 200 years ago, 90% of the world lived in extreme poverty.
90%.
Now it's less than 9%.
And that changed a lot just in this century, right?
Okay, so here's the facts. First and foremost, we do not have reliable poverty indicators for the world before the 1980s. So all numbers before that are estimations. Now, even if we are going to take that 90% figure, the measurement that is being used is the traditional World Bank $1.90 a day indicator, which they themselves have not really admitted that that's the extreme poverty line. But anyway, that's the most cited figure, $1.90. It was originally $1. They've been raising it over the past couple of decades. Let me explain to you what that $1.90 means. That $1.90 make people think that is people in say an African country, a sub-Saharan African country, living on what they would buy in their countries with $1.90. And that's not what it is. Because if that was the case, well, maybe because of purchasing power, that $1.90 does get them through a whole day. But that's actually not what it means. The $1.90 a day is purchasing power parity. That's a concept used in economics to adjust incomes on the basis of a baseline purchasing power level of a single country. That country is typically the US, and the year that is most widely used now is 2011. So you will say the poverty line is $1.90 a day, purchasing power parity, US 2011. Why 2011, not sooner? Because this exercise usually is done every number of years. I think it's every 5 years or something that they do this exercise and readjust purchasing parities around the world, because it's a pretty complex thing. So what this $1.90 means is, how would you live with $1.90 a day in the US in 2011? And if you live in the US or have lived in the US, or even if you haven't ever been to the US, you can probably imagine that you will not get very far in the US with $1.90 a day. I mean, that's not the extreme poverty line. That's like a starvation wage. You could die on that wage. So this isn't the extreme poverty line. This is like the extreme poverty of the extreme poverty. This is like the most miserable baseline of human existence. So we really need to use a bigger number to capture the number of people who are still poor, because even if they're not like the wretched of the wretched poor, they're still poor. They still face hardships in life. They still might not know whether they're going to have food on their table. Things like that. Maybe not on a persistent basis that they starve, but on every couple of days, maybe you don't know. Maybe they don't have a concrete floor. Maybe their house has walls, or maybe doesn't have a roof. I don't know. There's many, poverty is a multi-dimensional indicator. It is not just captured by one number. So it's very crude. First and foremost, the methodology in which that 190 a day is compared. But like I said, it's 190 a day in the US in 2011. That's the equivalent lifestyle that you would need to, if you were winning 191, suddenly by this standard, you are not extreme poor. You've got to be fucking kidding me. So here's the chart. By the way, this chart is from my book. I'm taking it. I'm plagiarizing myself. That's the poverty rate at 190 a day, and yeah, you can see that it's going down. The black line. If you take China out of the equation, it doesn't look that good, or that it's slightly worse, not hugely so. But let's use another indicator, because the World Bank uses various numbers. And they also use a 550 a day, which I think is far more. And by the way, there's people who've argued that it should be more like 10 a day, like the standard poverty line. But let's be generous. Let's take 550 a day. Remember, the U.S. minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. We're talking about per day. So living on $10 a day is still really, really fucking hard. So we're being still generous here with 550 a day in the US in 2011. And we see that, wow, slightly less than half the human population is still poor. And when we take China and India out of the equation, well, let's just take China out of the equation. That's the thicker gray line. We still have it slightly half. So half the population is still poor on 550 a day if we take China out of the equation, because China has taken out a lot of its people out of poverty. So yeah, that is the easiest and simplest way to debunk the poverty argument that these people always love to give.
Right? Didn't we make?
Yeah, just in the last 30 years,
and
a billion people.
Child labor, things like that.
Child labor down, illiteracy down, maternal mortality, infant mortality.
By the way, they never mentioned that most of these have been through state-led efforts, because kind of the reading between the lines is, look, the economy's grown so much during this period. This is all because of markets. And again, I debunk that in my book.
War deaths,
Right.
deaths from violent crime, violence against women, racism, laws that criminalize homosexuality, capital punishment, all of them down.
People used to shit in the street.
Yeah.
Way more, right? Wasn't that a big thing? Like not that long ago, like 1 billion people shit in the street.
That's right. Well, and it used to be true in Europe and the United States.
Imagine for a moment, and like I said, I don't want to hype up Pinker in any way, but you're a Harvard professor and you're in an interview, and one guy just goes, but look, all the people used to shit on the streets. That is like such a debasement. I would really think, like, what the fuck am I doing?
What?
And several hundred years ago, their cellars were filled with human feces. People would empty their bedpans out the window. But in the poor countries, it is also way down now. There's been a huge increase in access to clean water, in sanitation.
So you coined this term. I did a whole editorial about it, progressophobia. Why is it, do you think, that people want to resist the idea of progress? It seems to me like they can't keep two thoughts in their head at the same time. That, okay, we've made great progress, and yet we still have some progress to go. I feel like they, clap themselves on the back because, like, if I think things are worse than you think they are, I'm a better person.
Yeah, there's some of that. Part of it is just sheer incredulity, because the news is a highly non-random sample of the worst things that happened on Earth the day before.
Very non-random, as we found out from the Facebook whistleblower and other people.
Indeed, but conventional news as well. News is what happens. And
Right, but
often
Facebook did make it worse.
they did make it worse.
They do have an algorithm.
And there is a negativity bias in
Yes.
conventional
There is.
editors. And
So now we're going back into the issue of rationality. Oh my God, you must think the world is so bad, so much worse than you think, because you are irrational. Yeah. Again, I have a whole chapter. My second chapter is all about all the so it is true there are many biases that affect pessimism and negativity. Certainly the news does not help, but there's also a ton of biases that make people more optimistic than they should be. Obviously, he's never going to mention them. You have the illusion of control bias. You have the illusory superiority bias. There's so many as well.
and vetters.
It bleeds, it leads. It's not a new thing.
But in general, if you're presenting things that happen, there will be a bias toward the negative, because good things are often things that don't happen. Like there hasn't been a war in Southeast Asia in 40 years, but there's never a Thursday in October. And
It's just so funny. It's like, oh, I'm just going to pick a region of the world that there hasn't been a recent war with, and say, like, why doesn't he say that there hasn't been a war in the Middle East? Maybe because there are wars, ongoing ones. This is, I honestly don't know how thinking people can take Steven Pinker seriously.
which that's a fact.
Right.
It's like not
Right.
something not
It's
happening.
slow moving, sure.
By the way, cherry picking, I'm not sure if that's a cognitive bias, but it's definitely a deliberate argumentative tool to deceive your audiences, and he always employs it.
And a lot of improvements are incremental. There are a few percentage points a year, which then compound and add up. But again, there's never a day in which it makes a headline. So Max Roser points out that the papers could have had the headline, 137,000 people escaped from extreme poverty yesterday, every day for the last 30 years.
Wow.
But they never had that headline, and so 1 billion people escaped from extreme.
You could also have the headline, for example, in the US, every American could be X amount richer if we had a more equal society. You could do that as well. But Steven Pinker doesn't like inequality, I should add.
Poverty, and no one knows about it. So there's just that bias in the nature of news, which feeds into one of the most powerful cognitive biases, the availability bias, which is that we estimate probability and risk and danger by how easily images come to mind. So you read about a shark attack and you don't get in the water, even though the much greater risk was driving to the beach. But it lodges in your mind, and that's what the news stokes, what it provides, images of things going wrong. But you noted there's also an ideological reason why people.
I guess people who go bankrupt because of lack of healthcare in the US, it was just a bias. They were being irrational. They should have thought of all those people in Malawi who now have toilets. They should have thought about that.
Are reluctant to acknowledge progress, both on the reactionary right that looks back to a golden age, make America great again, we're living in an era of American carnage, and the revolutionary left. The system is.
The revolutionary left. Oh boy. So he has a whole chapter in his book Enlightenment Now, which I would only recommend you to read if you are writing a book about Steven Pinker, like I had to do, or B, you hate yourself, because it's a terrible book. He has a whole chapter where he goes on, what's the phrase that he used? Progressivophobia. So, yeah, the people who call themselves progressives are really the people who hate progress. Just because, God forbid, they criticize his view of the world and also his politics on how to deal with it, because that's the fucking problem with Steven Pinker. It's not just that he gives facts and figures, is that he has a political opinion about this. And he's basically, by his own words, I think, a quote, radical centrist. So this is all he believes in: incremental change, gradualism. Dude, we don't have the fucking time for things like climate change. He's going to discuss climate change in a bit, but you'll see what I mean by this.
So evil and so unreformable that there's nothing to do but burn it down and expect that anything that rises out of the ashes is bound to be better.
Dude, that, like, he hates people who, for example, like, he has no love for Bernie Sanders. He's never supported people like Bernie Sanders. Was Bernie Sanders a revolutionary? Did he want to bring the system down? No, he didn't. I mean, he was running in one of the established parties. He had no intention of destroying the system and creating a new one. This is ridiculous. He does that game that everyone who is actually on the right love to play, which is basically equating both sides as equally bad. And let's not kid ourselves. They're not. But this is music to the ears of Bill Maher, who also plays that game.
Now, both of those ideologies are kind of discomfited by evidence that bit by bit things can get better.
So people are not rational. I know that's a major theme of the book. Did they used to be more so?
Well, I'm always wary of saying something is bad now, therefore it's gotten worse. So often things were bad in the past too. The best explanation for the good old days is a bad memory. And you know, there were plenty of conspiracy theories, the protocols of the Elders of Zion and the Illuminati. There was paranormal phenomena, we call them religious miracles. There was fake news, reports of religious miracles. The papers of 150 years ago were filled with stories of, sea monsters and life on Mars and two-headed babies. So there's always an appetite for entertaining nonsense where you don't really try to get to the bottom of whether it happened or not.
So what is the root of it? I mean, I know that there's a big difference between ignorant and stupid. Stupid means you can't learn because you're fucking stupid. But
I wonder if a lot of people laughed because they saw Bill Maher in that description.
But ignorant just means you're not aware of something.
Well, indeed.
I mean, and most of us are not aware. I mean, there's an infinite number of things you could know, and even the smartest people like you are only aware of a tiny bit of them. So we're all ignorant mostly.
That's right, and we have to rely on...
If you're ignorant on many things, Professor of Psychology Steven Pinker, why are you writing a book that's fundamentally about economics and development?
Institutions and expertise. And
by the way, the same logic of Steven Pinker writing a book that's fundamentally economic in nature, because those are the arguments of progress. Fundamentally, a material vision of progress is fundamentally about economics. It's like if I wrote a book on what's his subject matter? Is it evolutionary psychology? I'm not quite sure. Like, I'm going to write a book on evolutionary psychology and present myself as a expert in a field which I have no actual title to back up what I say.
If you distrust the standard sources of information, then you'll be open to all kinds of nonsense. None of us really knows enough atmospheric chemistry to be able to retrace the steps that lead to the conclusion of human-made climate change. We kind of trust the people in the white coats, and if you don't trust them, then you're naturally going to be open to alternative stories.
And speaking of climate change, I read, it was in the paper this week, 4.7 million is where we've reached world.
Dude, I also don't know the nature of the science of atmospheric particles and things like that. I am thoroughly ignorant on that. Yet I understand that climate change is a real thing. How does that happen then? It's not because people are ignorant about this. And again, if you've been on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else where you've had debates with people or in real life, I'm in a debate club where every single friggin' month We've debated Brexit in some way or another. Has there been a single Brexiteer that has changed his mind? No. And now they have fucking food shortages in the UK. Have they changed their mind? A small number of them have. Usually, business people, people who own small businesses who've been affected by this. Now they realize. But it shouldn't have come to that. So I repeat, people don't have bad beliefs because they're ignorant or because they're stupid or because they're irrational. They do it because they're ideologues, and because we live in an age in which ideology is the centerpiece of everything that we consume. And the reason we're polarized is because we're pissed off because the system is not fucking working. That's why people, when the system doesn't work, is when you start thinking about ways in changing that system. And that's when your interest in ideology emerges. That's why you have these big debates about socialism and fascism and things like that in a country like the US, when you probably don't have them in Norway or Switzerland. I can bet you that this toxic political environment does not exist to such a degree in countries that are relatively okay. But they would, if they don't want to admit this, because then they would have to admit that they're contributing to this, because Bill Maher contributes to this. Steven Pinker contributes to this. But they don't want to admit it. I'll admit it. That's exactly what I'm doing in this YouTube channel. I have no problem admitting it, because this is a product of that system. The reason I have this YouTube show is precisely because of that. So these are charlatans, basically. This is charlatanism.
Worldwide deaths from COVID in the last year, but pollution, 7 million. So even before COVID was in the air itself was killing more people. But that's to your point about it's a slow-moving disaster. There's no.
So what is he trying to argue with this? That we should care more about pollution than COVID in the year of COVID? I think he's against mass band-aids. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No headline.
Indeed, and coal kills vastly more people than nuclear power, probably the safest form of energy ever invented.
Right.
But because there are gaudy disasters like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island that lodge in the mind, people mistakenly think that nuclear is more dangerous than coal. But speaking to your point about stupidity versus ignorance, there's also bias, and there is a correlation between intelligence and being resistant to classic cognitive fallacies and biases, like the gambler's fallacy and the sunk cost fallacy and so on. They're not perfectly correlated. And there's some biases that have no correlation with intelligence, in particular the my side bias. Namely, you steer your reasoning toward the conclusion that you want to be true in the first place, and that's usually one of the sacred beliefs or talking points of your tribe, your clan, your political coalition, your sect. And that's one of the biases.
So I have a lot of issues with the my side bias in the sense of whether it's a bias or not a bias, because I think if you're doing this deliberately, it should not count as a bias. The whole point of cognitive biases, if you've read, and boy have I, like I said, I've read all this shit, is that they're largely unconscious. Well, not necessarily unconscious, but we do them. The reason they're irrational is because if we were thinking about doing them, we would not be doing them. So the my side bias is there's another concept called motivated reasoning, which I think is it's better explained. Motivated reasoning pretty much is you start by picking the conclusion and then you work back rather than working towards arriving at a conclusion. And the reason that motivated reasoning, I think, is a better explanation or is better described, is because motivated reasoning does not imply that it's a bias. It implies that it's deliberate. It's a form of belief construction that is deliberate. Whereas Pinker wants to present this as it's still being done subconsciously. And I disagree.
Biases that smart people are as vulnerable as dumb.
Well, you know, smart people, when I made my movie Religulous, the beginning of it starts with me saying, I want to know how otherwise very intelligent people can wall off a part of their mind and believe in something which I think is intellectually embarrassing and obviously false. I know many people, very intelligent people, who've had an experience with what we would call a ghost. They're not religious people necessarily. They're not irrational people. They're very smart people. And they have, I've never seen a ghost, but they have some testimony of something that happened. They saw furniture move, an odor and a whooshing went by, some sort of thing which led them, these very rational people, to think, I don't know what it is, but there's a fucking ghost in the world.
Well, you know,
what do you make of that?
yeah.
When smart people...
It's an easy intuition to have, because all of us are dualists in the sense that we think people have a mind and a body, two different things. Because when we deal with each other, we don't treat each other like robots or wind-up dolls. We assume there's something going on inside the head, their beliefs, their desires, their feelings. From there, it's kind of a short step to imagine that the mind can exist independently of the body, because we already think of the mind as separate from the body. And there's even some experiences that make that plausible, like dreaming. You know your body's in bed the whole time.
These people, I said I wasn't asleep, I wasn't drunk. The chair went across the room.
Well,
what is that? Why would an otherwise rational person say that?
What does this have to do with anything? Just what?
Well, if they had that experience with a spiritualist or medium, it's because they have
no, they were just cleaning up late. You know,
Yeah.
they were just really. I mean, I don't know. I can't explain it either.
Yeah, there's a long tail of complex physical events where we don't know what happened, and it would be way too boring to try to find out.
Right.
But houses expand and contract, and there are sometimes earth tremors, and there are breezes through windows. Just like with unidentified flying objects. Yeah, they're unidentified. No one wants to go to the trouble of figuring out every last speck in the sky.
Right.
The fact that they're unidentified doesn't mean they're paranormal. That doesn't mean they're extraterrestrial.
Exactly. Always Great. Deluxe is out now across digital platforms.
All right. There we go. So, he barely spoke about climate change, which I think is quite shocking, being that it's kind of the biggest issue of our times, aside from, let's build more nuclear power, which I agree, that alone is not going to end climate change. This is my problem with him. He acts like he has the solutions to everything, and everything is this, incremental, gradualist. Let's not be like the revolutionary left and burn everything down. But he has no solutions to things like climate change, where we don't have time. We can't wait 100 years. And whenever he writes about climate change, and I found this piece right before I made this video, enlightened environmentalism, the case for eco-modernism. So this is a word salad. You can tell that this is not serious when you're basically just eco-modernism. So eco-modernism, in a nutshell, is stop worrying about climate change, because technology is gonna be like the cavalry and rescue us at the last minute. That's his argument. And you get a sense of it from Enlightenment Now, which I wish I could have picked some quotes from it, because I don't have it here with me. But this is just all, like, you read through this whole thing and you realize there's just no substance to this. There's no there's no sense that he has an actual policy set or set of recommendations that we should use to avoid the catastrophic outcomes of climate change. Yeah. So, I mean, look at this bit. Another response to climate change from the far left seems designed to vindicate the conspiracy theories of the far right. According to the climate justice movement popularized by the journalist Naomi Klein in her 2014 bestseller, This Changes Everything. Dude, he's quoting Naomi Klein as somehow, the very discredited Naomi Klein, as if this was like the final voice in leftist climate policy. You gotta be kidding me. How then should we deal with climate? Deal with it we must. I agree that with the climate justice warriors that preventing climate change is a moral issue, blah, blah, blah. But morality is different from moralizing, and it's often poorly served by it. It may be satisfying to demonize fossil fuel corporations, but that won't prevent destructive climate change. Good, then what are we going to do? So he doesn't have any solution to this. He's just complaining about people who have solutions to it, including, I should add, the right, whose solution is to not do anything. So that is eco-modernism for you. That is the epitome of Steven Pinker's Enlightenment thinking. Seriously, fuck this shit, and fuck this guy. And more importantly, read my fucking book, okay? Yeah, on that note, if you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe. Even more importantly, buy the book. I've already said it 3 times. What are you waiting for? Yeah, if you like my channel, you will like the book. I absolutely guarantee. Anyway, yeah, see you next time.